folks, welcome to another episode of DevOps Diaries, and what has seemed like a very long time coming, I have finally convinced Kevin Boyle, the CEO of Gearset, to appear on an episode. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jack. No convincing needed, just calendar juggling is the thing that was required, but no, I'm excited to do this for a while. So.
Thank you so much. And calendar juggling is something that you're becoming more and more familiar with as Gearset has grown, I'm sure.
Yeah, thankfully I have an amazing an executive business partner called Paula that sorts all this stuff out for me. So as Gearset's growing, I do less and less work myself. So this is like somebody else makes sure these things happen for me.
Should we get Paula on the podcast then?
Paula would actually be like really good at this. She's very au fait with DevOps at this stage. So yeah, she'd do a good job too.
Oh, good stuff. Kevin, we spoke already just about Gearset's growth and how crazy it's been. I'm very privileged to have been on this journey with you for 5.5 years now. So I've seen some pretty phenomenal growth in the company myself. But for the listeners, why don't you give us a little bit of the Gearset origin story and a bit of your background and how this whole thing started?
Yeah, it started really naturally. So there was the early team were mostly working at another company called Redgate Software here in the UK. And it's a DevOps specialist on the Microsoft platform. So we were pretty like in the world of DevOps. We kind of knew all these things. We sort of helped people do source control and continuous integration for databases. So it was a topic we were very familiar with. But Salesforce wasn't something that I was terribly aware of at that time as a software engineer on the Microsoft platform. And then Redgate, like a lot of companies, had its own homegrown CRM. And like a lot of companies, that homegrown CRM like vastly fell into disrepair and wasn't fit for purpose, and they brought in, like a lot of companies, Salesforce. And through that process, we got to see that implementation of Salesforce, greenfield implementation, put a bunch of folks from an SI here in London on it, and then a bunch of Redgate software engineers. And we got to see the process of just like the power of Salesforce, what it took away for you, a whole bunch of the platform stuff you didn't have to care about anymore. But we couldn't see then how to build software as a team in the way that we were used to, using things like source control, using things like continuous integration, rollbacks, that real time understanding of how you're doing. And so we looked around for a great DevOps solution for Salesforce. We didn't find anything that we thought was how you would build a world-class development team. And so we set off and did the research and eventually hit upon the idea that Gearset's turned into. It was a weird one because we were obviously working with this other company at the time, and I loved working for that company. It was a brilliant place. I've still got lots of friends there. But we were just so excited about this idea. It was an idea that was never going to quite fit within those guys. They were all Microsoft all the time. So we spun Gearset off into its own company, and that was in 2017. 7 of us left the nice comfy confines of safety and security that company offered, and went out on our own to build what Gearset's turned into.
Yeah. So seven people. We are now, what are we, 265 ish?
I think so. The number I heard the other day that was real scary was our recruitment team's so good that I think we've got like another 20 people have signed contracts that haven't started. So I think our actual head count is something like 280 or something. It's getting big. It's getting big.
Yeah, I remember when I first joined the company and we were about 30, accounting for a little bit of churn in people that had gone and left before I got there. I remember doing stand-ups in the office. Our Monday morning stand-up, which is now a 200-person Zoom call, was 30 people standing around in the office, and that growth is pretty crazy. But you mentioned back at Redgate, you were used to working in a way where you did things like Git, you did continuous integration, using source control, and having more visibility into what everybody's working on. A common story is that a lot of folks have transferred from inverted commas traditional software engineering into Salesforce development roles and are used to operating in this way. What for you and your team way back then was the main consideration, and why are some of those traditional software why wasn't it until you guys had the idea for Gearset and what Gearset has become that separated traditional software engineering and DevOps practices versus what Salesforce needs?
Yeah, I think some of it's emergent. Like if you take DevOps right back to its core and on any platform or what it's trying to achieve, it's it's about finding ways to collaborate and build software effectively. And it was the whole dev and ops coming together, but it's more like it's a broader thing of how do you how do you spec, design, build, release, monitor software efficiently and effectively, and hopefully as a software engineer, like in a fun way, like it's where we're removing a bunch of the friction and negative parts of the job. And so I think when you take it to that, a bunch of the reason that Salesforce DevOps came a little bit behind the broader adoption of DevOps on other platforms like Java or C Sharp or whatever is because the platform evolved at a different rate. So you sort of the launch of the metadata API. Well, I'm not very old. It actually was a long time ago, but it was quite long into the life of Salesforce before you could externalize the representation of the org. Apex was a good number of years in. Lightning Web Components obviously is even more recent. Flows, all these things where the platform evolved over time to become more and more complex, because ultimately what the platform was doing was modeling and representing all of what your business is, and businesses have become more complex. Salesforce now addresses more of the challenges within your business, and so the state of what it was modeling was starting to become more complex, which meant you needed more people to really build great solutions on top of it. And so all of that emerged from all of that, then emerged the need for a way for those people to collaborate effectively. And then because although it's a platform that looks a little bit different than other platforms, it does, like at its core, it doesn't really. You still have a bunch of folks that are trying to build complex software and workflow together. And so then the tools that other ecosystems had relied on for a bunch of years or decades in the case of source control, they're perfectly fit for purpose. It was just they weren't needed for a little bit into the life of Salesforce, and then once they were needed, the platform throws up some interesting challenges and quirks in terms of adopting source control as a team, adopting continuous integration as a team, flowing changes, both metadata and data around environments. Salesforce doesn't make some of that quite as easy as other things, and so you need something like Gearset or any other DevOps solution that you love. That you need that piece of glue that helps you orchestrate that workflow on top of Salesforce.
Yes, so DevOps is much more, as we see it and as I see it, it's as much of a cultural shift and challenge on Salesforce, more so even maybe than it was back then, to get everybody onto these ways of working. And Salesforce users do have some level of expectation when it comes to declarativeness of a platform and a system that they use. And with that in mind, I think Gearset's done a fantastic job of building the product to what it is today. There's a lot of folks out there that have been Gearset users from the very beginning and gone, this was a great replacement for change sets. And then they've grown into using the continuous integration part of the platform, have moved on to the DevOps pipeline part of the product. Can you tell us a little bit about how all the new functionality in Gearset, but how Gearset's existing functionality and new functionality is being constructed to best serve those users?
Yeah, for us, like DevOps is very situational, so it's about confronting the challenges that the team have. And for most Salesforce teams on platform, like there's some unique challenges that you only get in this ecosystem. And so the approach that we have taken through building all of those things you mentioned, like I guess what joins them all together is we have this framework, as you well know, but for folks listening or watching, there's this framework called Jobs to be Done. It's this technique by this guy, Bob Moesta. I'd recommend folks go and spend 10 minutes reading about it, but it's this idea of really getting to the root of what the user is trying to achieve. So when they came to use your product, or when they came to use when they Googled or found you or whatever, like what were they actually doing in their day that prompted them to go and find you? And that's a technique that really in every part of our business, we try and live by, like what's the user actually trying to get done. And what that allows you to do is, if you really live that, you're able to come up and speak to enough users. And thank you for all the users who have taken the time to speak to us and give us insight into what they're trying to achieve. But when you do that, when you have that nice mix of a really willing ecosystem that's excited for great software to help them solve their problems, really generous with their time and giving you product feedback, and then really good product managers, engineers, marketers, sales folks that really care about helping that customer, you're able to come up with quite innovative, bespoke solutions to whatever the challenges of that platform are. So if we think about, I'll use like a really small, I'll use two small examples. So um, Gearset has been underpinned by this really great comparison technology that we've had for years and years and years. I think that's really great. And when we came to see the explosion of Salesforce Revenue Cloud, the CPQ product, the complexity that's within that, where it's a mix of data, metadata, all that sort of stuff. There's other solutions out there, or like the sort of obvious naive solution would be to use like express this as a data problem, because that's sort of how the data, it's sort of how it's represented within Salesforce. But the team just went deeper and deeper and worked with more and more users, and it's really a configuration problem. So it's exposed in Gearset's comparison grid, where you can select individual like price book entries and all these things that get deployed, and to the user it's transparent. We'll understand that data hierarchy, we'll mess around with external IDs for you, we'll make sure the upserts work, all that sort of stuff. You don't need to worry about that, because Gearset will express this to you in the same way that the Salesforce UI does, where you just think about the configuration of Salesforce CPQ. And then that was sort of building on top of a whole bunch of the stuff that would been there originally. But then when you think about something like flows, it's a massive change to how Salesforce teams work, where now you've got all this. There's obviously been a lot of power in the declarative stuff for a long time, but flows is kind of a step change in terms of expressiveness of how you can map out really, really complex logic, but in a way that's declarative and not writing code. And so that opened up a whole bunch of interesting challenges about, well, you're still modeling a very complex system. You're writing code, even if it's visual. Like that thing, you could almost one-to-one translate it to Apex if you want, with all of the same challenges, but it's no longer nicely amenable to the techniques and approaches that folks have used to write code together as a team. And so this year, Gearset's got a feature called Flow Navigator, where we're giving you that visual representation of the flow, so you don't have to look at the XML that actually describes it. So you still get the same nice thing that you are used to seeing inside Salesforce itself, but we'll highlight to you the nodes in that flow that are different. We'll highlight to you where things have moved, where they changed, and we do that all in a nice way that behind the scenes there's like some fancy math and some fancy algorithms that make sure that we're doing like a nice semantic merge, a nice semantic diff, so that we're only showing you just the one node in the 2000 element flow that you've got, that's changed. And so it's sort of through that jobs to be done technique that we get to the real challenge that teams have and Salesforce teams have, the real challenge that admins have, developers have, architects have, release managers. Like these are the people that we these are the people that we exist for. So these are the people that we spend all of our time trying to understand their workflows, trying to understand who they're reporting to, what do they need to produce for all their teams that are external to them, what are the challenges they've got when they're building stuff, releasing stuff, monitoring stuff. So that's the technique. And then just lots of iteration. I guess the other thing that Gearset does nicely and has done since the start is we're wrong all the time. Like that first, like the first go at the job to be done, like when you try to, and the solution that you come up with that it's very often wrong. And so we're able to build and release Gearset itself. So our DevOps platform, we release that sort of 2 or 3 times a day. And that's to all users globally, across all regions, across all data centers, across all everything. And we've done that just like lockstep for about 7 years now. And what that allows you to do is build things in very small slices. So that first version of Flow Navigator, actually an interesting like a addition to this episode, to release like a blog post that has the step-by-step. What the team came up with first and where they finished up is very different. And a mix of that was sort of technical spikes as they were kind of building up, but also a whole bunch of like just customer research and learning. So really focus on what customers' challenges are, what they're trying to achieve, iterate lots, and you do that for 7 years. And I think you end up with, if you stay true to that, you end up with something like Gearset. And the other element is because the original 7 that started Gearset and everybody we've hired since is very weirdly passionate about this ecosystem, about this thing that we're doing. It's very strange. You can't explain to anybody outside the company. You can't explain to like any of my friends and family what we do. But this group of people are very very obsessed with solving this problem. And then we're also, I think, have a kind of like a goal of having good software. You know, there's companies out there you want to be compared to. Like we were a really early customer of Slack, and we loved Slack. And Slack was, in theory, not a lot of different than HipChat or Iris, any of these things that have come before. But there was something in the execution of Slack that felt very good. And Miro is another example. And obviously, Apple's like the gold star that everyone wants to be compared to. But I think there's something about building software that you'd be really proud of, that's not just aesthetically pleasing, because I think a lot of folks think about UX as a design problem, make it look pretty, but it's not about that at all. It's about getting a real deep understanding of the workflows and helping users really solve that problem in a delightful way, in a way that feels, when they use the software, this feels well crafted, this feels good, this doesn't feel cumbersome where I got to go to like 45 different dialog boxes to configure 45 checkboxes that don't make any sense in the label. Then I got to go to the docs to read what the label means in the weird dialog box to control this workflow that's really bespoke. If you get rid of all that crap and you create software that's really looks hopefully aesthetically very pleasing, but then in the use of feels robust and well crafted, and that type of, I think there's companies that really execute very well and achieve that, and Gearset certainly aspires to be one of those companies.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think one of those, the job to be done for, I would also implore anybody that's in Salesforce to look at the job to be done. And a lot of pressure we find is on admins these days to be like an admin and a BA and all these other things. And one of the most important things that you can do in that process is questions. There's somebody that's been interviewed on the podcast before, Jody Herbeck, who speaks about questioning and actually making sure that your users get the thing that's most valuable to them. I remember a situation at Gearset where somebody said from customer success, a customer wants like a button, so it generates these things. And you're just like, hang on, why? Actually, if you stop, and we could just put that button in there, but what are they actually trying to do with that button, or why do they want that output from that thing? Can we put that in somewhere else that improves the user experience? And I think that's definitely been my experience. We've never just put anything in the product just because a user says it is a good idea. If it is a good idea, then it gets wrapped into that user experience, like you've been saying. I think you talk about that original 7. We've been very lucky to have Stephen Chambers on the team, who's been thinking about that since day one, and everybody that we've hired since.
Yeah, when I find customers make a feature request, it's normally it's not that the idea is either good or bad, but it's the problem's real. So the thing that the reason they stopped doing the thing they were doing in that moment and took the time to email you or send you an intercom message or send you like a public tweet where they're very cross or whatever, whatever it is, that thing that prompted them to do that problem's real. So it's a problem in the workflow, a problem with our software, a problem with whatever. An opportunity for improvement, potentially, if it's even something we haven't tried to tackle. And it's just they have recognized, oh, if you did this, it would be even better if, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I'm most grateful to the user for in that moment is not their idea for how to solve it, but for their recognition of the opportunity to improve, and then giving me the time to really do that jobs to be done 5 whys questioning technique to really get to the heart of it. And then maybe their idea is the correct one, or maybe there's an even better solution where you make it like entirely transparent. One of the things we try to do at Gearset is the product has very few options. Like there's no real settings you can configure. There's a couple, but not too many, where we try and really think through not having wildly divergent workflows for different teams, because a lot of the things they're trying to achieve are similar. So how can you make the product feel polished and work really well for everybody in the default state, and then like have some escape hatches if folks do truly want to work in a different way, but don't just put in, oh, this team wanted to work this way, so there's a magic button there that does that thing in a slightly different way for them. It's like, well, why did they want to do that in a slightly different way? What was the reason that they wanted to be different? And see if you can learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else that you've mentioned about DevOps generally being an iterative process and releasing small slices of features to users is something that we've always done, and is maybe becoming a little bit more normal in Salesforce land. That constant iteration you mentioned, we do it across the whole business cycle. So you're a software engineer by background, but you've had to learn to be a CEO and get involved in sales and marketing at the same time. What's been some of the challenges for you as a CEO, I guess, coming from your software engineering background and applying these kind of principles to growing a business across all those functions? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, because I know I did. I know I didn't prep you with this question.
No, that's a good question. I think the The interesting, there's a bunch of ways I can answer that. So I think that I'm sort of hung up on the fact that you asked the interesting challenges, or maybe the problems I'd overcome. I think the interesting, I've had the most fun job of the last like 8 years, 10 years that I've ever had in my entire life. It's been absolutely amazing, but it's a little bit hammer and nail. Where the way I approach sales and marketing, because for folks listening, my background is a software engineer. So prior to Gearset, that was kind of all I'd ever done was write code, design products, and maybe a little bit of product management if I was being particularly like generous to myself. But really, code was the thing I was kind of good at. And so it's a little bit hammer and nail. Where when Gearset started to go, and I had to do sales, and when it became obvious that the most important thing I could do for the business was to start doing sales and marketing or customer success or all these other disciplines that I wasn't that familiar with, I kind of just took who I was and what I knew how to do to those problems. So if we take like our marketing, for example, one of the real nice ethoses of software engineering and is if folks use source control, that like pull request workflow where you take the work that you've done and you put it over on the other side of the table, and you bring in a reviewer or someone that's a peer or manager or whatever. And the idea is that together you're on one side of the table and the work is on the other side of the table, and you're critiquing that work. So you know you don't define yourself by the thing that you've produced. You're just trying to get it to be as good as possible. So you don't need to do defensive or justify how it is. It's just like this was my, I took a good stab at this. This is what I done, and now let you and I, Jack, work together to make it even better. And so we took that to the way we do marketing, where we all of our stuff goes through crazy amounts of peer review and copy edit, because we're trying to make it really good. If we want to write a white paper or a case study, it's not just about like reach or page views or any of that stuff. Like we're trying to help people be better at this discipline, because we think if they're better at DevOps, that'll be good for us as a company, right? Like so, just educating the ecosystem is a good thing. So we try and write like thoughtful, good content, like this podcast, right? Like you want it to be. It's not about doing the broadest reach possible for the sake of it. It's about getting, with the exception of this episode, getting interesting people to talk about things that are relevant to the ecosystem, and they're trying to help educate them or be thought provoking. And so we did that in sales. It was kind of the same, where you've been victim to this, haven't been in a Gearset in the past, but there's a lot of call coaching we do, because that's kind of the only thing I knew how to do. We would just sit together and listen to the calls with customers or users or demos, and just talk about like how'd that go, how could we have done better here, or, oh yeah, you missed the customer pain there when they were talking about that, you kind of missed that, and that was it's not that you missed an opportunity to sell our software, it's that you missed an opportunity to help them in their like role and be better, and hopefully we'll sell some software along the way. That approach of just get a little bit better tomorrow than you are today and repeat that every single day, that was the approach that I knew how to run from software engineering. And so we applied that to everything. And then unfortunately for the 260 odd people that have joined since, that then forms culture, for whatever word you want to choose to represent that idea. But it became kind of infused through everything. And so you just have this very iterative, very learning, very humble, very, very detached from, critique the thing I've done because it'll give me a chance to improve and a chance to learn. That's great. I'm not going to be annoyed that you're critiquing me.
Yeah.
And so the way that manifests is we use Slack the same as the rest of the world, and we have AEs give like direct feedback to our product team all the time. Like we have engineers that will give feedback on marketing copy, because we all just want it to be good.
We do. I will say that was, speaking of like new starters and all the people that have joined us since, I think that is one of the things that I came from an environment that wasn't very attuned to that level of continuous iteration and feedback before. So it was one of the things that I was just like, oh damn, like this is really different and uncomfortable. And then you find yourself sitting in those rooms, and then you're learning how important it becomes after you've been at the company for even just 2 weeks. It can be initially uncomfortable if you've not been in that environment, but something that we do quite well, because every new starter that I speak to says the same thing, is that the onboarding at Gearset for new staff is really great. notwithstanding my experience where it was like, this is the stuff you need to learn and go and learn it. We've come along. We've
You
come
joined it
along.
slowly, it's going to be different. It's going to be, you knew what you were getting into.
I did deep end. One of the things that is really important in our onboarding process is literature, which gives people some expectations of how Gearset works and types of culture. What are some of the books that you give to new starters that is important to understand how Gearset works as a company and how we approach problem solving here?
Yeah, I don't actually know how much we do this anymore. What actually goes out to different people, but the ones that we certainly did whenever, if you join Gearset, you get like a box of stuff delivered to you, and it comes with like a nice thing, and it's all very nice. When I was the one literally putting those together, the books I put in there were, there's this book, the Mom Test. I think it's, I can't remember the author's name anymore. I think it's Rob Fitzpatrick. I can't remember. The Mom Test, as in your mother, MOM. And it's a brilliant book. It's basically product management 101 for folks that are getting into that, or it's very similar to the Jobs Be Done framework. There's a million of these things that are very similar, that are about how to ask users questions to try and get to the heart of what they're doing. And the idea of the Mom Test is, you've got an idea for a business, you want to go start something, or you want to start a new venture, or you want to change job, or whatever it is, and you go and ask your mom, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, is this a good idea? And the author's proposition is that your mom will always say yes because they want to be supportive and cheerleadery. And I always say, like, this clearly marks this person has not been Irish, because if you have an Irish mother, they just go, wait, there's a risk there. What are you doing? Like, what do you do? You're happy. You're taking a chance. Like, don't do that. Just be happy with what you're doing. Was my experience. I get on very well with my mom, by the way, but it's a different attitude to cheerleading. There's a different type of cheerleading that I think happened with this author's mom, and maybe American culture in general. But it's this idea of how you can question an idea, and in a way that you can ask your mom about it and get her true response instead of her cheerleadery response. And then the other one, when I get into sales, I think we still send this to, if you're joining our sales organization, To Sell as Human by I think it's by
Daniel Pink. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a friggin' brilliant book. And it's the way Gearset does sales. If anybody's ever been through our sales process, it's not very salesy. Like, if you compare us to some other folks around, Gearset's not the most salesy organization in the world. Like, we're very helpful, we're very consultative, but we're not very, that sort of stereotype of the like sell ice to the Eskimos thing, and like be very bolshy and very macho and lots of bravado, and like we're not really that. We just want to learn about you and see if we can help you, and then if Gearset fits in there, great, and we'll try and like show you why we think it does. But like, we don't need to make that seal, like, we don't need to have that thing happen. And To Sell as Human is that idea. It's that we're kind of all modern sales, with the access to information that everyone has, is all about communication. It's all about understanding and communication and the back and forth, rather than trying to convince someone they need something like that. It probably won't work, and it certainly won't work that if you don't think it actually is a good solution for them, somehow tricking them into using it is going to be in any way good for them or good for you in the long run. So it's not how to have a really great sales conversation where you're learning and doing that really human communication. So that's a great book. And then I also love the Good Strategy, Bad Strategy stuff by Richard Rummelt, which again is very similar to Jobs to Be Done or the Mom Test, but applied to strategy. So as a company, as a business leader, as a Salesforce team, whatever you're doing, and you're trying to set the strategy for the next year, you're trying to think about which things to tackle next. Good Strategy, Bad Strategy gives you a bunch of techniques and a process to really question what is going on. Like, what is going on in your world? What's going on in the world of your customers or your stakeholders? What's going on in the world of your competitors or other divisions within the company, or whatever it is. And then once you've kind of written down what the state of the world is, then you think about what your biggest challenges are, and then you think about how you might tackle them. And that's very different from a lot of strategy work, which is really sort of goal setting or vision setting. And it's not that those things aren't important, but the real thing that's going to move you forward is a very realistic, very honest appraisal of what the situation is, and then the key challenge that situation presents, and then the actions that you'll take to solve that key challenge as expressed by the by that factual description. That diagnosis is what Richard Wilmot calls it. But it's a great book as well. It's a little bit more academic than the other two, but it's also a great book.
Yeah. You mentioned something interesting there. You talk about what the problems of the world are and the challenges that each of those problems represent. And we're very fortunate to work with some of the largest organizations in the world, some of the largest Salesforce teams in the world, and everyone in between. And there is, like, if anybody picks up a newspaper, or if anybody even does that these days, or goes on their preferred news outlet, there's words like workforce reduction or hiring freezes and all of these kind of things. Companies still seem to be investing in, especially the companies that we work with, are still investing in DevOps tooling despite those cutbacks in other areas. What do you think the reason for that is, especially as it pertains to what we offer and the Salesforce ecosystem in general?
Question. I think there's one answer here, which is probably like around an ROI calculation and like an efficiency thing. I don't know how many folks I actually speak to where that's like a big driver. I think the biggest driver in the customers I speak to is there's this, it's sort of like the opportunity cost of you're using Salesforce to drive your whole business. It's this critical thing.
Literally the whole business as well.
Yeah, literally the whole business, like the marketing, sales, service, everything, right? And then with Data Cloud, it's becoming this ingestion engine for everything, right? So Tableau doing your visualization, it's like it's driving your whole business. And that's great because there's like leverage and scale and the 1 + 1 = 3 stuff going on. But once you're in that situation, the team that's responsible for driving change through Salesforce, for enabling the CRO or CMO or whatever, that team has a big responsibility and a big job to do there. And so I would say just equip them with whatever you can to help them do that, and you'll get that back in the impact that they deliver. Allow them to be the happiest, highest performing team in your business, and then the rest of your business will have happy, high performing teams as well, because they'll be using a really great set of back office systems that allow them to do their job really effectively. And then I think probably more in the last, I think that's been true for a long time. And then I think probably what's happened in the last couple of years is the ROI calc comes in at some point. I'd say the ROI on DevOps, and not just Gearset, but any DevOps solution that's out there that you like to look of, is really very easy once you start to put pen to paper. But that's not the reason you should do it. The reason you should do it is because that team has such a big job, big responsibility, can make a huge impact. So enable them, and the rest of your business, it'll just have this multiplicative impact. I'd say that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I think happy humans make happy software or good software or happy customers, right? And something that I talk about a lot these days is that focus on the human element of the teams. And we often focus on the users and the happiness of our users and them having a good product. But if we're not making the teams happy that are developing and delivering it, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So if we focus there, then that's really nice. It makes us feel good.
A huge difference from Salesforce from other platforms that I've worked on is the impact that a Salesforce team can have. And sorry, the like per capita impact that a Salesforce team can have, where we work with obviously huge organizations, tens of thousands of employees, and they can still have relatively modest Salesforce teams. Whereas if you went and looked at their number of Java developers or whatever, it'd be many orders of magnitude more. And so it's just this incredibly productive platform, right? It takes care of so much. It's so expressive. It's so tailored to the jobs to be done, that the representation of that back office state and things, that one admin can just have a huge impact. It can have a huge downstream impact on how your sales teams operate, how your deal desk operates, how your service workers operate, how your folks out in the field operate. Like it's just this hugely leveraged thing. And so yeah, I think make those teams real happy in whichever way you can. Give them great tools, give them great access to training, give them great access to how to get better in their role. And yeah, you'll see that many times in the rest of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're a man that practices what he preaches, because Gearset has always given us the best things that we need to get the job done here, and it's something that I've certainly been very grateful for. You talk about Apple being the pinnacle. It's just like when we were originally back on Chromebooks and we were all the sales team were whining, just like, these aren't fit for purpose anymore. You're just like, okay, I'll give you all MacBooks.
No, MacBooks are perfect. It was the management. It was when we brought in MacBooks, we had to hire someone in IT, and I was afraid we wouldn't find anybody really good. Thankfully, we did. So our IT team's friggin' excellent. We probably should have done it earlier. But yeah, that was the main reason. Was like I just didn't want like a load of hassle, and I thought MacBooks were going to be hassle, and in effect, they haven't been. It's been a delight.
There you go. Especially not a hassle when you don't have CrowdStrike
Yeah,
messing
yeah.
up your business. um, Kevin, what's been your proudest moment as Gearset CEO, and what's your outlook for the company in the future?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch because it's now been close to 10 years. So there's lots of different things, lots of different moments, some big, some small, lots of things like the company's achieved so much. Like if you're seven random people and a bunch of nerds that sit down at the start, like the idea that we get to this scale wasn't even like when you joined, it was 30. Like the idea that a couple of years later we'd be sitting and we'd have helped so many people and this many customers. That wasn't like you have this thing in the back of the head where you're trying to do that, but like you don't actually think you're going to do it. So that's been quite nice from the macro scale. But I think like the truly like the proud moments, when I think of specific moments, they're either all about the team or they're about our customers. And I think about like a couple of the stories from the early days. At the start, Gearset was not nailed on, so we were doing the research and stuff within this other company. We'd come out to Dreamforce. I'd managed to blag a speaking thing somehow and got up and did a talk. And then afterwards, I was sitting with
Which
one
for
of
you is hugely uncomfortable, right?
I hate talking, yeah. So like again, it was like what's the most valuable thing you can do for the thing you're involved in at that point. And it was like one of the most valuable things I could do was go out and test the idea. So go talk about DevOps on stage at Dreamforce and see if anybody comes up to you afterwards. Like go test the idea, and did it. And I was got a good response. And then we went to Mel's afterwards, which if anyone has been in San Francisco or has been Dreamforce, it's like a little institution. For the Gearset team, it's loved because we're here in the UK, and the UK, I think by law couldn't allow somewhere like Mel's. So, I think the NHS would like some senior doctor somewhere would go in and say no, you can't open such an institution. So when we're in San Francisco, when we're in the US, we always go to Mel's, and one of Gearset's really early investors, we brought him to Mel's, and we were just sitting having a chat about this thing, what Dreamforce was, and all this sort of stuff, and should we go and do this thing? And somebody at the table next to me said, "Oh, are you that Gearset guy?" And I was like, "Yes, I am, of course, that Gearset guy." And he talked about just the need for something really great in the ecosystem to, the stuff that we built at that stage that he was using it was really helpful to him, but like we could do so much more. And I honestly could not have set up a better like Patsy, a better like plant to go in and do that. And just having that guy say all those nice things was very because it was very uncertain at that time. So that was a pretty proud moment. And then we still bring lots of our engineers and things out to Dreamforce, and we had this guy join us as a grad called Matt Guy. He's still with us, and he came
I
out
love that guy, for the record.
he's a great play football with them, and don't, because the company's got big, I don't get the right code anymore, so I don't get to like hang out with the engineers as much as I used to. But I still get to play football with Matt.
How often do you review a PR?
I still review PR almost daily. Still do it almost daily. That's my like. I don't know about you, but there's lots of stuff in work that's fun but challenging. It takes a toll on you, and like my job, as any job does, has a bunch of that. And so sometimes I need a little boost, a little like recharge, a little shot in the arm. And for me, that's a PR, like going and reading some of the code that our software teams have written and getting to like, first of all, keep my eye in, like keep aware of what's happening, what the state of the art is. I get to be aware of what we're building, not at the product level or like the Notion doc or the Confluence doc that describes it, but the actual code and the actual thing and the architecture of the software. I still get a bit of boost out of that. But anyway, so we brought Matt to Dreamforce, and he was a new grad that had just joined us. I think he'd only been with the company for like a month or something. It was really early. And Dreamforce, if you've ever been a vendor at Dreamforce, you get in a couple hours early, you go up to like the top of Moscone West, you're sitting in the Trailblazer Forest or whatever it is, and they then like open the doors, and the escalators just bring like a zombie army up. It's just like this huge like, and this thing comes up, this horde of people that are coming into the conference for the first time. There's like all this adrenaline, it's all exciting, and somebody like zips out in front of the group. And so you've got a group of like 1,000 people or whatever walking towards you, and then this one person, there's like a couple of steps faster. They're like a bit more intense about it, and they like start walking over, and it's like they're clearly walking now for the Gearset booth. They're not walking for like the Astro Teddy or whatever, like, or a talk. They're walking towards the Gearset booth, and they look pretty riled up about something. And they get to the booth, and they go, "Who built that clone features feature? Who did that clone packages feature?" And I thought, oh no, has this led to like data loss? Has something gone wrong? And we sort of said, yeah, it's actually, that was us as a team, but the software engineer here was Matt. Is there an issue with that? He's our foremost expert on that feature. And the guy did like a big high five to Matt and said, like, it's the best thing ever. And just like getting to like see that kind of reaction from the customers. Like, they've spent thousands of dollars to go to San Francisco, to go to a conference. There's all these experts around. There's all these everythings around. And for them to come and like the first thing they do is to hunt down the company and the engineer that built that feature, and to sort of see that reaction, to see that, like, that's good. And yeah, and I think that there's a million of those stories like across the entire customer base, because as I said, I can't really explain what I do to friends and family. They have no idea. Most of them don't know what Salesforce is, and they certainly don't know what this niche within a niche within a niche thing that we do is.
And if they do, they go, "Do you work for Salesforce?"
Yeah. So you help Salesforce build their software. It's like, no. We help the customers of Salesforce build their software. But thankfully, we do that for like a lot of cool logos. So like the things at home that I listen to music through, or if I'm doing some online shopping and I get to like buy stuff, or just knowing that we help those people in some small way, and sometimes in a very big way, where where I'm interacting with the system. I was like, I recognize this experience site. This was deployed using Gearset. I know the team that built this, and trying to do this the old way was a real pain in the ass. And then we brought out this feature that allows you to do like sliced experience cloud deployments, whatever. And now their life's easier. I think those are, when you sort of think back on the quite long hours and the hassle and all the why people do their work, I think being able to point to some stuff and go, yeah, I had a somewhat of an impact beyond the thing that I did. I think that's quite nice. So yeah, it's mainly the proudest stuff when I think about the specifics are always on the team. Like, I'm really proud of the team we've built. I'm really proud of what they've grown into, what they've achieved, and then the impact they've had for customers. Just always those two things. Always.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, it makes my job super nice too. I spend a lot of time in rooms around Dreamforce or TDX or the community conferences, and the amount of people that come up to me and say, "Gearset's such a great product and has really saved my ass a couple of times," or very frequently, every week in some instances, is super nice. So yeah,
I remember when the Permageddon thing happened. When Permageddon happened, and there was like the big massive permissions reset across like lots and lots of Salesforce customers.
Yeah, 2019. Yeah,
2019. That was cool. Like, being able to help people, or now look at the backup product, like the number of people where they've like accidentally integrations run amok, and now lots of fields or lots of records have been very rarely deleted, but like corrupted in some freaky way. And knowing they can go and reach that, it's like, oh, you really saved my job there. That was, thanks for that. Those are like the nice moments.
Okay. Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with the listeners, and it's nice to bring one of the first original 7 people responsible for the platform to the listeners of the podcast. And if you've been listening to this and have wondered who Kevin Boyle is, and giving you a little bit of an insight to the man himself, is there any closing comments that you'd like to make, Kevin, or any last pieces of advice for anybody that's considering changing their DevOps practices, or just anything?
No, I'm sure we do all the usual stuff around come and talk to us and get a trial and all that sort of stuff. So I would say my closing thoughts are like the best part of my job on a daily basis is speaking to folks in the ecosystem. I particularly love speaking to Gearset customers, but anybody at all trying to understand what their challenges are. If you did want to get in contact with me directly, if you want to set up a call, if you want to exchange a few emails, I'm just Kevin@gearset.com. And genuinely, like when I talk about those boost moments in my day, that like shot of adrenaline that I get from PRs, the other one is interacting with the ecosystem, interacting with folks. So please drop me an email, please tweet at me, whatever it is you want to do. And I'm very happy to chat. I love chatting about Salesforce, I love chatting about DevOps, I love chatting about software engineering, I love chatting about business. So whatever it is, I'm very happy to chat to you.
Yeah, so Kevin doesn't want to spend any more time talking about office moves or facilities, so so fill up his calendar, folks. Kevin@gearset.com. Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
Cheers.